28th of February. I keep saying February, 28th of January, 2025. And crazy things happening in the world. There's a video about some current affairs stuff I'll talk to you real quick about. The ceasefire between Israel and the Hezbollah in Lebanon has been extended, as I uh, anticipated, and as many people anticipated, because, of course, Hezbollah has not withdrawn all of its troops according to what it signed and promised that it would do. It has not withdrawn all of its assets from southern Lebanon, as it is required to do, to remove them to north of the Litani River. And as such, Israel remains in southern Lebanon. Israeli forces remain in southern Lebanon while they clear out more Hezbollah assets that they find. They've found many in very recent hours and days. And there's an agreement to extend the so-called truce between Israel and Lebanon. They've agreed to extend the truce until February 18th. The interim or caretaker president of Lebanon has made a statement about it, and basically said that the truce will be extended. So is Israel, and so that is happening. And the Washington, accepts that, whatever, as mediator, and I suppose France does too, from what I understand. Is the other leading mediator, because of course France has a very strong vested interest in Lebanon, given its history and cultural ties and all that stuff vis-a-vis Lebanon. And this should come as no surprise, right? That Hezbollah broke its word and remained south of the Litani River. And that is why we're seeing also Hezbollah leaders, right, calling on civilians in Lebanon to antagonize Israeli forces that are in southern Lebanon, and literally to start attacks against them for the purpose of generating propaganda in favor of Hezbollah, which is crazy, right? So they're literally sending their own people to fight against, like, their own Lebanese civilians, to fight against Israeli soldiers, against whom they obviously have no chance kinetically to win any kind of battle against or something. These are basically unarmed civilians. They're not really unarmed. They're, look, a rock is a weapon, okay? So they're throwing rocks, or they're doing whatever, they're being pushy or whatever they're doing. They're being aggressive towards the soldiers, approaching them as much as possible, and eventually getting wounded or killed by Israeli gunfire after the Israelis shoot in the air and tell them to back away. There's rules of engagement with the Israeli army, in case you're not familiar, just like with any normal standing army. And the rules of engagement with the Israeli army are particularly stringent. I can tell you, you're not allowed to just shoot somebody, right? Like, just off, for no reason. Even if they're approaching you, you have to have good reason. And even if they're being aggressive in their stance, you can't just shoot them. You have to give them warnings to stay away. You have to give them multiple warnings to stay away. You have to fire warning shots that will not hit them. You have to fire multiple warning shots that will not hit them. There's a whole procedure for that. But anyway, the point is, they're pushing to the point that Israeli soldiers are actually shooting at them, and they're injuring some. They've killed some, and it's happened again yesterday and today, or yesterday. But again, because Hezbollah is literally telling the people to go and fight against the Israeli soldiers in order to let them go back to their hometowns and villages in southern Lebanon, despite the fact that they're not allowed to, because the ceasefire is still in effect, and because this phase of the ceasefire, when Hezbollah is supposed to withdraw all of its assets and forces from southern Lebanon, is still ongoing, as agreed to by Hezbollah when they originally signed it, and agreed to by the Lebanese government with Israel. And so Hezbollah is just blatantly violating once again. And once again, the powers that be are not enforcing the rules of engagement against Hezbollah by allowing Israel to basically continue destroying them full force. Now, should they? Well, in my opinion, yes, they should. Israel should go right back to destroying Hezbollah assets full force, not just piecemeal, as they're doing at the moment, clearing out whatever they happen to find while leaving the country, okay? And whatever. I'm not in the intelligence of the army. I don't run the army. I don't know what they're doing, everything. But clearly, from what is reported, Israel is retaliating when it finds violations or when it's attacked, and that's what they're supposed to do. But they really should just say, no, listen, you've actually violated the ceasefire, so it's over. So we are going to continue decimating you. Right? You have breached your word and your contract, and that's it. You've broken the agreement. We're going right back to getting rid of you. Right? That is what should happen. Now, everybody, of course, wants stability and peace and all that, but not everybody, right? Hezbollah sure doesn't, and the people that support them sure don't, because if they did, they would not break the ceasefire rules. They would not flagrantly violate the rules. They would move their butts and their assets north of the Litani River so that the citizens of Lebanon can come back to their homes and villages and towns and all that stuff in South Lebanon, and so that the Israeli civilians who've also been displaced from North Israel, right? I'm in North Israel right here, and I can tell you there are tons of villages and towns that are empty or practically empty of civilians, right? Since more than a year and 5 months now, because of Hezbollah's attacks against Israel, right? More than 30,000 rockets, 33,000, 35,000 rockets, whatever it was, were fired from Lebanon into Israel. Rockets, missiles, drones, complaint cylinders, okay, for lack of a better term. More than 35 or 33,000 complaint cylinders fired into Israel. So, there's some 60,000, 100,000, depends on whatever the number is, doesn't matter. Say 60,000 people in Israel have been displaced from their homes for more than a year and almost a year and a half now because of Hezbollah. And they can't return to their homes. Israel has again delayed the order to tell them to go back to their homes. There are some people who have gone back, but very, very small numbers in certain locations where it's effectively safer than other locations, but it's not really safer. It's frankly just as risky because their rockets can reach anywhere in the country anyway. But when you're right on the border, obviously there's, mortars can hit you, right? And when you're 100 kilometers into the city, or into the country, or 200 kilometers in the country, you're not likely going to get targeted by mortars, right? But you're going to get targeted by rockets and missiles and drones and things like that. And also when you're right on the border, Hezbollah terrorist cells of terrorists on the ground can try to infiltrate the border and do ground-based attacks, just like Hamas did around Gaza on October 7th, 2023, and which Hezbollah has done many times over the years. They send in 1 or 2 or 3 terrorists to try to do as much damage as possible. Obviously, when Hamas broke through the fence October 2023, they sent in thousands and thousands of Gazan residents who were terrorists, participating in terror activities on that day. So the ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel holds tenuously. I maintain that it is not going to last, unfortunately. I would like it to last. I would like Hezbollah to stop being insane people, but good luck telling insane people to not be insane and just hoping that works. That's not going to work. Hezbollah gets its funding and training and resources from Iran. And it doesn't matter that Lebanon stopped one airplane full of cash or whatever flying into Lebanon's main airport in Beirut a month or 2 ago. It makes no difference. Okay, they have tons of weapons and money anyway from the decades they've been there. Yeah, whatever. It'd be nice to have one more plane of money, I guess. But what, you think that in the last month and a half they haven't gotten another plane in? Of course they have. But they stopped one for show, or maybe they stopped it not just for show, to send a message to Hezbollah that you can't do this anymore. But they're doing it anyway, right? We know that. We know they continue to get supplies from Iran. We know they continue to get money from Iran. We know they continue to get training from Iran. All right, now that there's no Hezbollah actively engaging in stupid things in Syria, because Syrians don't like Hezbollah because of most Syrians don't like Hezbollah because of what Hezbollah did in Syria when Assad was still in power, all right? they helped him murder about 600,000 people in Syria during the last 11, 12 years, so since 2000, or more than that, yeah, 2012, 2013, something like that. Right, since that time, the Hezbollah forces in Syria were basically mercenaries for Syria, for the Syrian army, right, doing their dirty work. The Syrian army also did a lot of dirty work, but Hezbollah contributed significantly to that because Syria was obviously a very strong ally of Iran, right? And that whole Iranian, Syrian, Lebanese connection is now kind of shattered because Iran has effectively lost Hezbollah as a major fighting force. They're still a fighting force, and they're still significant, and they're still probably the largest fighting force of terrorists in the world, but they have been decimated in terms of their leadership, and a lot of their kinetic capabilities have been destroyed by Israel's actions between largely from September to November of this past year, right? Like in a 2-month period, Israel really destroyed a lot of what Hezbollah had left, but they still have a lot left, right? There was at one time an estimate that Israel had destroyed 80% of Hezbollah's ability to launch rockets and other complaint cylinders. But that doesn't mean they destroyed 80% of their rockets and missiles and complaint cylinders. It just means they destroyed 80% of their launchers that they knew about. Yes, launchers are difficult to replace because they're big and heavy and expensive and hard to move. You know, you got to ship them in by airplanes and all this stuff. But they are replaceable, right? Yes, they may be costly. Yes, it may take some time to replace them, but they're not irreplaceable, okay? Like, at all, right? And they absolutely will be, right, if they have not already been. And certainly some of them have been, right? Now, maybe not all 80% of them, because it took many years for them to build up that arsenal, but you can bet your butt that Iran is ramping up its production in order to be able to resupply Hezbollah as fast as possible to get them back to the level they were at before Israel did that. And you know they're going to supply them with even more, probably by the time Hezbollah decides to do the next stupid war, like a full-out war with Israel, which they absolutely will decide to do unless they are actually driven from power. And the only way they're going to be driven from power, unfortunately, is by Israel having to go and decimate them and just get rid of them. Not even decimate, just fully annihilate them, right? And they are going to have to surrender and leave Lebanon permanently, right? They should go to Iran, where they're loved and where they can, stop their madness. But of course they won't. If they go to Iran, they'll just be indoctrinated to more insane things. But at least if they all leave Lebanon and leave the immediate theater of conflict here in the Middle East, well, that would be good for Lebanon. It'd be good for Syria. It'd be good for Israel. It would be good for everywhere that Hezbollah operates in the Middle East, right? But that's the situation we have. Israel and the Hezbollah ceasefire tenuously holding. And for now, Israel basically accepting these political pressures from outside, saying, don't go back to full-scale war with Hezbollah, and keep the ceasefire going as long as you can, which, okay, whatever. If it holds, great, but it's not a permanent solution. This is not peace, right? Everyone's walking around on eggshells, waiting for the next, bomb to drop, so to speak. And every day that Hezbollah continues to violate the ceasefire agreement by not pulling its forces and assets north of the Litani River, we're just getting closer to the tinderbox exploding once again. And and they're just going to literally try to use their civilians, like they want dead Lebanese civilians. There's no question about that. They're ordering them to go and fight IDF soldiers, which is crazy that anybody who's a civilian in Lebanon would actually do that. Right? They know that they're just going to get mowed down if they actually try to launch some kind of organized attack against a bunch of well-armed Israeli soldiers. It's just crazy, right? But they're doing it for propaganda because they know useful idiots in the left whether it's here in the Middle East or in the West, will gobble that garbage up and say, look, Israel is committing a genocide in Lebanon. No, Israeli soldiers are being attacked by organized mobs that are being sent to their death by Hezbollah. And they're crazy enough to do what Hezbollah says them to do, which is insane. But that's the kind of psychopathic death cults we're dealing with here in Israel that we have to deal with in our neighbors' countries, right? When they relentlessly attack us every single day, multiple times a day for, ages. On another note, yesterday was the 80th anniversary of Holocaust Remembrance Day. All right, it was the 80th anniversary. Basically, it's been 80 years since the Holocaust ended in 1945, and every year there's a Holocaust Remembrance Day. And yesterday, and in Ireland, the president of Ireland hosted an event to commemorate the Holocaust Memorial Day, the 80th Holocaust Memorial Day. And in his speech, which started off kind of nicely, he then compared what's happening in Gaza to the suffering of the victims of the Holocaust, which is a disgusting offense to any Holocaust survivors, any victims of the Holocaust, and anybody who's related to anybody who ever lived through the Holocaust and or died in the Holocaust. It's absolutely offensive. Like, to say that what Israel is doing is in any way, shape, or form comparable to what the Nazis did is just absolutely horrific and insulting and disgusting. But it's what you typically get in a European country that is just blatantly anti-Israel, as Ireland is. And I'm sorry to all my friends in Ireland, but you live in an anti-Israel country, and that's just the fact. Your government hates Ireland, and many of your people in Ireland hate Israel. Your government, hates Israel, and many people in Ireland hate Israel, and it's disgusting and sad. And part of the reason is, of course, that Ireland has a long history of supporting the Palestinians against Israel, including Palestinian terror groups. They used to fundraise for them quite a lot, especially when the IRA was very active. So that's what's happening on this day in relation to news about Jews are news and Israel and the crazy world that we live in and the reality that we deal with being in Israel and or being Jewish around the world. Hopefully Ireland will wake up and stop supporting the crazies that they do, but they probably won't. What would be nice is, hey, listen, if you're Jewish or Israeli, but not necessarily Jewish, but you're in Ireland, get yourself safe, look, I'm all for having Jews live around the world. It's great, it's wonderful, but there's a time and place to recognize danger, and Ireland is not exactly a very safe and wonderful place right now for Jews, in my opinion, and certainly not for Israeli Jews. In fact, yesterday at that memorial speech, they dragged out a Israeli scholar who's an expert on the subject of the Holocaust, and she wanted to actually speak at that event, but they didn't let her because they didn't want any Israelis speaking at an event of the Holocaust Memorial Day, Holocaust Remembrance Day. She's like the most qualified person to speak. Why wouldn't you want her to speak? They didn't want her to speak. Anyway, when he started ranting about the disgusting comparisons he made between people that lived through the Holocaust or died in the Holocaust and people that are in Gaza, she stood up in like silent protest or whatever, and the security in the event dragged her away, literally dragging her to the ground and making her leave the event. Why? She was just objecting to his words and wanted everybody to know that she objects to his words, which is her right? Don't you have some form of free speech in Ireland? I guess not, right? I guess it's okay to have free speech and demonstrate in Ireland as long as you're not a Jew from Israel on Holocaust Memorial Day, Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's disgusting. And on the 80th Holocaust Remembrance Day, there probably won't be that many, if any, Holocaust survivors alive in another 10 years, right? So this might have been the last time that a big round number, like the 80th anniversary, will happen where there will actually be survivors who were young children at the time, but they were children, they were alive, and they remember it, and they can speak to it from experience. Probably the last time such an event will occur with such an amount of attention, because the 80th, it's not like the 81st or the 79th, it's the 80th. And no, they couldn't allow an Israeli Jew to speak, even though that's her field of expertise. It's just absolutely disgusting. And the fact that the Prime Minister of Ireland said what he said is shameful. It's just shameful. There's no other words for it. So that's what we're dealing with. And yeah, that's my take on it. Come to Israel or go somewhere else that Jews are more welcome than Ireland. And yeah, sure, you could decide to stay there and stand your ground and be like, no, we're free here. We're free to be here. We want to be here, so we're going to be here. And you could do that. You could be, sure, but just know that there's potentially added risk for that because of the crazy people that live there that are supportive of the crazy people that want to destroy us here in Israel. And maybe in Ireland, maybe you should welcome in a couple million Palestinians. Why don't you do that if you're so pro-Palestinian? If you feel so badly for the Palestinians in Gaza, why don't you temporarily house them for a few years to let them, get out of Gaza, get out of harm's way, so that Israel can just mop up whatever Hamas terrorists are still there. And yeah, sure, enjoy having a couple million Palestinians living in Ireland. Why not? Right? What's wrong with that? Do you have a problem against that? Do you have some issue with why you wouldn't want a couple million Palestinians living in Ireland? Why wouldn't you do that? Right? The hypocrisy from Europe is disgusting. It's disgusting and it's shameful. And shame on you, Ireland. That's my message of peace and love. See you guys. Shalom.